It's Waxing Lyrical, baby.
Hello, Waxers, and welcome to Waxing Lyrical with Mains and Dutch. I'm your host, Mains, and my colleague in the Danger Zone in Rayford, to Mr. Neil Dutton. How are we, Neil?
I'm glad you said it's Mr. Dutton, because that's how we address each other with respect in the NFL world these days.
Do you want to explain? Because you're subtweeting a tweet, which is a subtweet of a person.
Well, apparently our friend of the show, Andrew Brandt, said when he was growing up, he was a Washington football team fan, but his fandom ended when one of his friends went round to Daniel Snyder's house to pick up his daughters after they'd been having a play date there. And the conversation went as thus: "Thanks for having the girls, Dan. It's Mr. Snyder." We were not lacking evidence that this man was a colossal prick, but yet he keeps providing it.
He's done nothing to suggest otherwise. I think he is saved at the moment due to, I think he knows where the bodies are buried. The Roger Goodell comment in relation, I can't believe we're going back over this again, but the Roger Goodell comment on the emails that, they're doing it to protect the anonymity of the people who didn't want their names out, rings a little bit hollow for me, if I'm honest.
Yeah. It's one of those, that rings about as hollow as Yorkshire finding out that there were incidents of what they called inappropriate behaviour and what most of us called racism. And then 6 weeks later saying that having done a thorough report, they found that no one was guilty. So what, this racism just appeared, did it? Just, they opened a cupboard and out came racism? Yeah, no. Moving on.
Institutional disrepair for two once storied entities. They stink. And as Joe Judge would tell you, it starts from the head up, right?
Yeah. But, as we have noted throughout their illustrious history, both Washington and Yorkshire have been plagued with racial intolerance.
Yeah,
it's a fact.
Yeah, although for Washington this time, somehow the horrific racist tendencies are not the subject of the issue. This time it was just they were horrific to females at every level of the organisation.
Yeah.
And people outside of the organisation. Mm-hmm. And right now, what happened was a dude got put on gardening leave and fined $10 million, which he probably makes in gate receipt for one game.
At his crappy stadium.
At his crappy stadium. Yes, at his crappy stadium. But that's not what we're talking about this week.
No.
It's not, honestly. Although it feels like we're going to talk about it every week until Dan Snyder isn't an owner anymore. Which could be a long time. I feel like Wes being constantly asked about the Cincinnati Bengals, right? Do I have to go through the ownership debacle in Cincinnati again? I hear him telling me. But we're not talking about that, as we said. This week we're going to look at head coach hot seats. Easy for me to say that a few times fast. See how you get on.
No.
We're going to go AFC and NFC, some defos and some possibles in the coaches who may be looking for different employment next year. Then we're going to move on to the fantasy portion of the show with Fancy Darlings, where Neil was on fire last week. Fancy Loser also on fire. And then our fantasy predictions bound to go wrong, which is the opposite of fire. Whatever the coldest thing on the planet is, that's mine and Neil's fantasy predictions. And I've got a doozy this week, which I assume will also be rubbish, but it's fun to play. But without further ado, let's move on to plug into the mains and look at hot seats. Neil, we're reaching that point of the season where people start looking at head coaches and thinking, not 100% sure this is your job come this time next year. What I've done is I've got a number of names. We'll start with the AFC. I've got two defos who are on the hot seat and two possibles. And there's also another head coach which you wanted to discuss who's been linked with other jobs. We'll come on to that. And then in the NFC, I've got 2 defos and 4 possibles.
I think what we should just stress is that when we say possibles and definites, this is not possible and definite to get fired. It's possible and definite that their seats are getting warmer.
Correct. Like I mean, it's difficult to know who's going to get fired. We could look at some of these, but there's people who are definitely feeling the heat from the press, and I assume from their own bosses. And then there's others who you're like, this hasn't gone as well as it should have, and people are probably telling them this hasn't gone as well as it should have.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of names on here that when we say hot seat, no, the seat's on fire, and the fire has spread to the rest of the building.
Yeah, the seat's already burned down, and they're surrounded. It's like the "this is fine" meme on the Twitter.
His name might rhyme with cat baggy.
Yeah, but we'll get onto it. Let's start in the AFC, Neil. First definite for me is Brian Flores. I think they did really well last year, 10-6. Should have made the playoffs, but didn't, because they got absolutely destroyed in a meaningless game by Buffalo in the final game of the season, which isn't great. They are 1-5.
1-6.
1-6 because they decided in their infinite wisdom not to take the bye after the London game. Although they
lost 6 in a row. They
have done that before and won in a previous life. I think it was 4 or 5 years ago. They don't seem to be playing very well. We'll come on to their quarterback, who was QB1 last week, but also threw one of the worst interceptions I've ever seen. Although I don't think Tua is the issue. The amount of noise around the Sean Watson thing makes me uncomfortable at best. And it is in a situation where like they don't seem to have drafted very well. They got rid of a draft pick to sign Jalen Waddle, and I wonder if someone's going to take the blame for all that, and it might be Brian Flores.
Yeah, I think they probably overachieved last year because the rebuild, as it were, I don't think was supposed to see them get so close to the playoffs last year. I think they went from bottoming out in Flores' first year. Then last year it was let's retool, let's see what resources, let's see what we've got, see what we can develop. But because they were very strong on defense and functional on offense, they took it to the last game of the season and could have made the playoffs. Therefore, people may have got a bit overexcited. I'll hold my hand up. I was one of them, and may have thought that their offense now had all the pieces it needed to help Tua take the steps to develop into the quarterback they hoped he could be. For various reasons, this has not happened. Tua, as you say, I don't think everything is his fault. I also don't think he's looking like the solution at best at the moment, whether that's his fault or not. Offensively, they're keeping themselves in games, but the strength of this team is the defense, and that's losing them games because they're letting teams march down the field on them in game-winning drive situations. Now, and this is what it always comes down to: when you're a defensive coach and your defense is struggling, where do you turn to? The blame can only lie with you, because very few defensive coaches come in and say, no, I don't do anything. I'm the CEO here. I just look down from heaven on everyone. Nah, it's your team. It's your unit. So you have to take the blame. And most people like Brian Flores. I think he's I think he is a good coach. But you've lost 6 games on the trot, and 2 of them in heartbreaking fashion because of how late it was. Your quarterback's making a few plays here, but still making a few mistakes. That interception, as you say, was horrific. But they're struggling.
When you're a defensive coordinator, what you need to do is make sure you have someone good on offense who can do that for you. They decided they were going to have 2 people who would try and do that for them. I'm not really sure which one does what, but they seem to be there at all of it. So that wasn't the best move. In that kind of same situation, Neil, I think it would be beyond naive to suggest that Vic Fangio isn't in the hot seat in Denver. similar kind of situation. They have the highest paid defense in the league in terms of against the cap, and it's not great. It's okay at best. And I mean, I think me and you know more about offensive scheme than Vic does, and I don't think he knows how to hire people to do it or get players in the most important positions, i.e. quarterback, to help him.
We said this going back to the summer. They had a lot of pieces in place that we liked all across the roster. The most important one was a glaring omission. Teddy Bridgewater's been fine, but fine doesn't get you anywhere. Not when your defense, which is supposed to be the strength of your team, is not performing. Teddy Bridgewater's not going to be able to bridge that gap. But this is your own fault. Now, they have they have resources and capital that they could invest in a quarterback. People keep telling me this is not the greatest quarterback class in terms of rookies. Mark Schofield, friend of the show, does say it's not bad. People are making out that it's terrible. It's not. It's just not 2021. There are, of course, a few veteran quarterbacks who might be had, shall we say. But I think it's safe to say that whatever direction they choose to go with quarterback in 2022, it'll be with a different head coach.
If I was Aaron Rodgers, who's been the name constantly linked with the Denver Broncos, I'm not 100% sure I want to hitch my wagon to a defensive coach who doesn't know anything about offense. That's a no from me, Bob. And if that's the case, and they've got a chance to get said Rodgers, Vic's gone. Let's quickly move on to the two possibles, Neil. I'm going to join them both together. Only because, well, they do have slightly different things, but it's the same kind of concept. Robert Saleh from the Jets and Urban Meyer from the Jacksonville Jags, both first-year head coaches, and both could be seen into a situation where the wheels are falling off and they're going downhill and there's no way they can stop it. Now, Urban's caused most of those issues himself, so I have no sympathy for him. Robert Saleh took over the Jets, and that comes with its issues, as he's finding out. And with no Zach Wilson and the way they're playing and the thought of having no quarterback backup in situ to be able to help you in that situation, you think, does someone panic and pull the trigger on the whole New York Jets organisation when you're only 6 months into it? And if one franchise was to do that, it would be the New York Jets.
It probably would. I think they liked Saleh because they saw him as a leader of men, and they were trying to invigorate the franchise because it's been moribund for too long. It's been not relevant, and not only worse than not relevant, it's been awful. You know, the product on the field has been bad. I think maybe they underestimated just how bad they were by not investing in other players. Corey Davis is fine, but the running backs they collected, no. If you're going to do what Saleh wants, which is be strong defensively, and you're going to run a Shanahan-style offense, I know Kyle and Mike threw anyone out there. Yeah, they threw youngsters, not Tevin Coleman. Come on, we've done this. You know, I think everyone's over Tevin Coleman. And the defense, it was going to be stronger. They lost pieces. So I think that gets Robert Saleh a bit of a pass. They're not good. But I think if they went into the season thinking they were going to be good, they were naive. And for that naivety, maybe they deserve to be fired. But I think Saleh is safe for this year. Meyer can go tomorrow for all I care. Every other game he is head coach for is one too many, in my opinion. Hated the hire at the time. Don't like him as a person. Think an awful lot of the trouble that happened regarding those storied players at Florida he contributed to. And as you say, he's made them a circus. He's made them a laughing stock when there was so much positivity a head coach could have used. They could have basically showered Trevor Lawrence with praise. They could have, anointed him as the king of the franchise the second he was drafted. But no, Urban Meyer made it about Urban Meyer. And ultimately that's what it has been. So I'd be happy to see him go, by the time people are listening to this. And I'm not a Jags fan. I've got no particular allegiance to them. I know some people in the States think that we all support them here. We don't. We don't want them to keep coming back. Believe me, they do not have a large following here. They don't. You're kidding yourselves. So, but I have some sympathy with them that a fan base that has been... I mean, when I started watching the NFL, they were strong. They were a young franchise. They'd only been in about 5 years. But they were renowned for their defensive strength. And they had some decent offensive playmakers. You talk, Brunell, Taylor, Jimmy Smith, Keenan McCardell. They had playmakers. They were a good team. But they've been crap for the best part of the last 15 years. And a new head coach is not supposed to come in and make you a bigger laughingstock than you have been. And he has.
Correct. We also wanted to talk briefly about a seat that's ice cold, but someone who's been linked with with a different job. Mike Tomlin was linked with the USC job. I think he was linked with the USC job because Carson Palmer said might be a good idea. I'm not necessarily think he was necessarily linked with it in any kind of major way, but Mike was quite vehement in his disregard for said link. He was very angry. Said, you never say never, but I'm saying never. He seemed offended. Now, he then highlighted that people like Sean Payton and Andy Reid, i.e. long tenured head coaches, weren't also highlighted. I'm not really sure or want to get in why he thinks they're not and he was. What I will say is he's perfectly valid to say, why would someone leave the Pittsburgh Steelers to go to USC?
Yeah, Pittsburgh Steelers have had 3 head coaches since 1969. USC have had 3 head coaches this decade. There is no longevity there. Plus, let's say the Steelers decided, you know what, we've tried. We've been loyal. You won a Super Bowl early. You got to another one and lost it early. We've not been back. We think we went somewhere else, Mike. I assure you, he would be hired before he cleared out his office in Pittsburgh by an NFL team. Why would Mike Tomlin, after 15 years coaching the NFL, want to go to a job where he would have to take on a second full-time job at the same time and recruit kids to come and play for him when he's got a job for life in the NFL?
Which I don't think he's ever done before.
No, he's an NFLer.
Yeah.
His last college involvement was when he played at college.
I think this is a talking head concept, right? Someone asked someone a question and they said this. Now, I guess Carson Palmer could have said anyone, right? But he didn't. He said Mike Tomlin. Why he said him, I don't know. But it's silly and naive and it's not happening. Let's move on to the NFC, Neil. 2 defos on the hot seat. Your favourite Matt Nagy and obviously Joe Judge. Both teams stink. Nagy's teams stink at the place where he is the main focal point, which is offense. Joe Judge, I'm not really sure what he does, but his team seems constantly injured, which is weird because, in pre-season he was making them do laps and shit. And they're also not very good. For every John Harbaugh who comes in as a special teams coach with no particular allegiance to either side of the ball and can operate as the face of the franchise and delegate to able assistants, there's a Joe Judge who comes in. It's like, sorry, to borrow the line from Office Space, what is it you say you do here? Now, if you're going to come in and be the big rah-rah guy, but the message doesn't take and your players quit on you, which they did 2 weeks ago, I'm not saying they didn't against the Panthers. The Panthers suck. So, the Panthers beat themselves. And I won't hear it otherwise. The Panthers beat themselves. But the effort they showed in their loss to the Rams was pathetic. The play of players that are on the field is subpar. And as I say, you decided that as a first-time head coach, you were going to trust someone like Jason Garrett to run your offense. I think we've all seen enough of that to know it's not a good offense in the modern NFL. So it's we know this, it's the 3 envelopes. If things are going wrong, you fire your offensive coordinator, you fire your defensive coordinator, you write 3 envelopes. That's the way it goes. Well, he hasn't done any of them yet. So seeing how bad they are, and people keep telling me, well, Daniel Jones hasn't been as bad,
as bad this season. Yeah, that's great. He averages 2 turnovers a game in his NFL career. This is not a rookie. This is year 3. Now,
you're going to have to pay him $30 million plus if you want to keep him, right? Because that's the going rate for quote-unquote franchise quarterback.
Yeah. With the other clown.
What have we said that we don't need to say again, right?
We said it all. It's a classic example of Andy Reid taught him everything he knows, but he didn't teach him everything that Andy Reid knows.
Yeah.
And, it's a bad optic. The offense looks disjointed. They took Justin Fields, and it's clear this coaching staff have no idea how to use him. We still don't know who is actually calling the plays. Well, sorry, I do know who's calling them, but is the other one vetoing it? Or is he just taking credit when it works and shedding the blame when it doesn't? It can't work. Your defense isn't good enough. It can't meet you halfway. You're wasting a quarterback who everyone in that city and people we know who are Bears fans like Adam Rank, they've been crying out for this guy for years, and you're wasting it. Go away.
How do you have someone with the physical tools and ability of Justin Fields and have no clue how to use him? Like, let's say you know how to use him and he's not very good. That happens all the time, right? Like, that's how the NFL works. 50% of all the first-round quarterbacks are busts. But they look like they have no clue who Justin Fields is or was or how he plays. There's no concept to, if you look at, say, Kansas City, because we talked about Reid because Nagy was there, right? The offense that Alex Smith ran and the stuff that Patrick Mahomes did, in some ways, was similar. But in other ways, is very, very different. And that's because Alex Smith and Patrick Mahomes, I'm just going to break some news for you here, have different skill sets.
Yeah. It's hard to look at the Bears and not think, you'd just run this offense if it was Dalton on here, wouldn't you?
Yes, exactly.
And it'd look shit if Dalton was running it. So why did you do this? Why did you not wait? Well, yeah, it is at the moment. You wasted a first-round pick next year to go up and get this quarterback who you have no idea what to do. And you're going to put another head coach in the same position that you put Matt Nagy in the first place. He's going to come in with a second-year quarterback that he didn't pick that you're going to have to hope he can energize.
Yeah.
It worked well for 1 year with Trubisky and Nagy, but you're asking another coach to do it again.
Bad franchises make consistently bad decisions. Possible out in the NFC, Neil. I've got 4 names here and 4 very different things. I'm going to explain them each briefly. First one is Pete Carroll. This is a longevity question. I don't know about you, and I'm not one for reading too much into comments made by people very often. But when I heard Pete say, the only reason I've been here so long is because Russell Wilson's been playing quarterback. Now, it could be seen as a flippant comment, or, it's just saying, I've got a franchise quarterback, and if you've got a franchise quarterback, then you're good, and if you haven't got one, you're not. And that's fair. Pete's not stupid. It's crazy sometimes, but he's not stupid. But I do listen to that and think, he's the oldest head coach in the NFL right now, I think. And, yeah, the Russell Wilson thing shows that his team's not very good. And it wasn't very good when Russell Wilson was playing, but anyway. And the Russell Wilson wants to leave thing, and you're like, do I need to do this? I'm going to move on to the next one. That's Kyle Shanahan.
North Turner 2.0.
You know and I know that, we joke about being good or bad at our jobs. And, that's for other people to decide. But while those other people are deciding, I would really like Kyle Shanahan's PR office to assist me in showing how good I am during pay negotiations. I said to you, I read a tweet that right now Kyle Shanahan has the same winning percentage as Joe Philbin. He did go 13-3. He did get to a Super Bowl. he was close to winning it, but he didn't win. And I think he went 6-10, 4-12, and is now 2-5 in the or 2-5 in the other seasons. Regardless of what we think about Kyle Shanahan as an offensive mind, which is brilliant, he is, I'm going to swear really, but he's fucking awful at player personnel decisions, and I think player personnel relations, because he seems to throw them away, pick them up and throw them away like your 3-year-old playing with toys. Ooh, look, shiny new thing, this is going to be great. Oh, look, it's broken, throw away.
Yeah, he as I say, he's Norv Turner for the 21st century. We know Norv was an excellent offensive mind. His head coaching tenures were debatable for various reasons. Kyle should be told he has these players, go off and run the scheme, but you're not picking them.
Correct.
We will take your input, but then it'll be, no, this is who you've got. Stop dicking around with Brandon Ayuk. No, stop trading up with running backs. Stop pounding the table for them. In fact, here's what we're going to do to stop you from pounding the table. You're not allowed near the table. You're going to sit in another room and you can ring into us. You're not getting up on the table. We're not having another Joe Williams, Trey Sermon debacle. Great offensive play caller, play designer, whatnot. Not a head coach for me. And, I'm telling, as you say, he got to Super Bowl. Didn't win it, so it doesn't matter.
I've got that horrible feeling that when he is eventually fired, which I believe he will be, we will find out that he didn't want Trey Lance, he wanted Mac Jones.
Very possible.
And that's that. Yeah. Anyway, I've got 2 others, Neil, and they're both in the NFC East, and they are linked heavily to me and you. Nick Sirianni is at best weird. At worst, just the next Joe Judge, just kind of Joe Judging his way through life. Although he was an offensive guy, right? He's not a special teams dude, is he?
No, he was an offensive coordinator who's never called plays.
Love those. Want my favourite kind. In the offensive coordinator room that he didn't call plays, in that offensive coordinator room, did anyone ever call run plays? Because he doesn't seem to have them in his playbook. He does seem to have the, let's give it to my quarterback and he can run about a bit. Or the, what I like to call, we're down 28, let's become dead good.
The Eagles offense plays 10-minute games. The first 5 and the last 5. Unfortunately, an awful lot happens in the time slot in between it, and the Eagles at the moment, the way they're constituted, are letting the things that happen in that middle segment ruin everything that happens in the first 5 minutes and makes the last 5 minutes meaningless. Jalen Hurts is not the biggest problem.
No,
he's also nowhere near the solution. Now, whether that's play design, not helping. Whether it's personnel, it's not helping. It's play design and is pretty bad. If you want, and I do it, so you don't have to. If you look at the QB school videos for Jalen Hurts, look at 3 throws that Mark Schofield does on Twitter. It's not great. There are fundamentals that Jalen Hurts is not good at. He's being put in a position where he's being asked to do too much without a run game. I tell you this, I mean, we know I have mixed feelings on running the ball. I don't think it's the most efficient way to move an offense in the 21st century. I just don't. I've seen the numbers. Yeah, you can't do it. Sometimes you just need to feel the physical. Yeah, bullshit. I don't care.
I heard that one, and that one made me laugh. Sometimes you just need to feel people hit people, and you don't. It's not boxing.
But here's what it's a small plate. Now, I like coaches, players in any sport who make their opponents look silly. Take the RPOs and shove them up your arse and run the ball. Don't RPO it. They're terrible. You're supposed to put the defender in conflict. The only conflict is between me and the telly because I'm going to smash it to pieces watching it. Just run the ball. Run play action off running the ball. RPOs, take them away. They were great for that 4-week run when the Eagles won the Super Bowl. Since then, they ain't done a lick of shit for the Eagles, and I'm fed up of seeing them. Please. Yeah. I know, maybe, as you say, maybe Nick Sirianni is just zany. Zany and eccentric is okay when things are on a somewhat even keel. When they're going downhill fast and you're coming up talking about, are we fertilising the players properly? You don't sound weird. You sound batshit crazy, and that does not get the fans on side.
That does not get the fans on side in 31 franchises, right? I know the one it definitely won't get them on side in, and that's booing Santa's favourite team, the Philadelphia Eagles. Yeah. But the worst thing about this team, Neil, is not that. Is that right now they're about to dive head first by, not luck, but by good management into 3 top 15 draft picks. And the issue is they're going to let Howie Roseman pick again. He should be allowed to get the deals that get you to the 3 first-round draft picks, and then much like the Kyle Shanahan situation, he should be made to go and sit in a corner and let the talent evaluators sort this bit out.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Maths Geek. Now the people who, now the football guys will take over.
We talk...
Just a quick one. It's like, as you say, about Eagles fans and, fertilise and whatnot. Do you think Buddy Ryan was telling that crap to Reggie White and Jerome? Because I certainly don't.
I don't. Our division once had Joe Gibbs, Bill Parcells, Jimmy Johnson, and Buddy Ryan. Guess what? It doesn't anymore.
No.
Final one is Ron Rivera. Let me explain. What happens if the emails come out? What happens if the team goes 2-15? Both right now, as we stand, reasonable. The ownership's out? You get a new owner in. The Jeff Bezos, Washington Amazons, or whatever you want to call them. You could have a full blow-up situation going on. Just thought to throw that out there. That's the last one. That is it for Plugged Into the Mains. Let's move on and talk fantasy, and let's review, first of all, how Neil got on a Fancy Darling last week.
Hello, darling.
Neil, 2-1 last week. So close to Mount 500, 10-11. Last week, he picked Tua Tagovailoa. I think he should get multiple points for this, as Tua, even though he threw the worst interception I have ever seen, was QB1. 32.6 points, 291 yards and 4 TDs. There you go.
Me and Kay Adams singing from the same hymn sheet.
I have no words to that, and your wife is behind, or your fiance is behind you, although she can't hear us, but I'm not even going to, in case she can lip read, I'm going to move on.
No, she's closed the door, she's gone.
You picked again Ricky Seals-Jones, Dick Jones. He was tight end 9, 6 catches, 51 yards, 11.1 points, and a victory. I wish Tyler Hennigan would have thrown it to him before he then gave himself up on the 1 yard line.
That's a horseshit call, by the way.
Of course it is.
It's a terrible rule.
It's a terrible, terrible rule, but, they would have lost anyway. Let's not lose too much sleep over it. One loss, Darnell Mooney. Neil thought he'd pick a fantasy darling on the Chicago Bears. 2 catches for 39 yards, 6.9 points. It sucked. Never mind. 2-1, 10-11. Chance to get to beyond 500 this week, Neil. Give me your first fancy darling, please.
As we harken back to the good old days, my fancy darling is Carson Wentz. Now, in the last 5 games, the Tennessee Titans, who the Indianapolis Wentzes are playing, they've allowed an average of 25.8 completions for 281 yards, 1.2 passing touchdowns per game, and 20.7 fantasy points. Now, that includes a last week's shellacking of Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs, and also a game against a hobbled Carson Wentz back in week 3. So since week 4, the Titans are actually allowing 303 passing yards per game and 1.5 touchdowns. So that's what they've allowed since the last time they played Wentz. Wentz has got healthy. He's not the 2017 Carson Wentz. He never will be. That guy's not coming back. But he looks like the 2019 Wentz, which I think from what he was last year, the Colts will probably be happy with. So in his last 4 games, I think since he last played the Titans, Wentz is averaging 250 passing yards per game, 1.8 touchdowns, 21.9 fantasy points, and 0 interceptions. The Titans did beat the doors off the Chiefs last week, but their defense is still shit.
In the back to the question we were talking about before, it's almost like Frank Reich knows how to design offense based on the quarterback he's got. But anyway,
yeah, he runs the ball. The ball.
Yeah, exactly. I digress. Number 2, Neil.
Number 2 is a defense. Because if you're playing against Mike White, because Joe Flacco's not ready, I'm picking you. The Cincinnati Bengals this year, they have 44 hurries on defense. That's the second most in the league. Their hurry rate of 14% is the 5th highest. They have 19 sacks, which is the 6th, and 81 quarterback pressures, which is the 2nd. The New York Jets this year, now granted most of this was with Zach Wilson, but now Mike White's in there. They have turned the ball over on 17.6% of their offensive drives. That's the 3rd highest rate. They've scored on 22.1% of their drives. That's the lowest rate in the NFL. They've taken 20 sacks, 7th. 8.6% sack rate, 3rd. They've thrown 11 interceptions, 1st. They've allowed 67 pressures, and their pressure rate is 28.2%. The Bengals defense, like the Bengals as a whole, is frisky. It's impressive. It's going to rip Mike White to pieces. So the Bengals are out there in your league, I assure you. Go and get them, plug them in, thank me later.
I have to say, Neil, like last week was a bizarre weekend in the NFL. And most people will say to you that the most shocking result was the beatdown the Tennessee Titans put on the Kansas City Chiefs. For me, it was not. It was the Cincinnati Bengals going to Baltimore, pulling their pants down, beating them seriously on the butt.
I do not know. If you think about who's beaten who's played who, I cannot tell you who the best team in the AFC is.
The Cincinnati Bengals, the Cincinnati Bengals are 5-2, right? They have lost to the Chicago Bears and the Jets, right?
No, they didn't lose to the Jets.
Oh, they lost to someone.
Packers.
Oh yeah, just like how do you lose to the Bears? Like how does this team lose to the Bears? It's crazy. The AFC is wild. The AFC is wild, and I wish them all the luck in the world of coming out. Final team / person, Neil, please.
It's the same game. It's CJ Uzoma. Get the name right. The Bengals, as we know, they have a wide receiver who's quite good, Jamar Chase. So they're not going to force feed the ball to Uzoma. But Uzoma has shown in the last few weeks that he has been fantasy relevant on very small workload because he keeps finding the end zone. I know it's a bit fluky and touchdowns are a team stat. We can't really rely on it. But we have to consider that the Jets are seeing tight ends targeted on 24.2% of their pass plays, and they are allowing 8.2 yards per attempt. So even if they just go to Uzoma a couple of times, 3-4 times, that's all we ask. As long as one of them ends up in a touchdown, that'll be fine. And I'd say he was the tight end 1 last week. So I should have gone with him over Seals Jones. It would have been even better. So I just think as a plug-and-play option this week, there's only 2 teams on a bye, but those 2 teams are taking the tight end 2 and the tight end 6 off into the bye week with them. So you may need someone to plug in, and an awful lot of the top quarterbacks, a lot of the top tight ends who you might want to stream this week, they're already owned in more than 50% of leagues. So you're playing with fire thinking you can get one. So Uzoma, the upside's there, the floor's just pretty low.
Fantastic, Neil. Let us move on and let's find out how Neil got on last week in Fantasy Loser. Last week, Neil picked Danny Dimes. He was QB 16. 16 out of 26 teams, so he stinks. We knew that anyway, but, he's getting better. Although, again, as Neil quite rightly highlights, he is averaging 2 turnovers a game in his whole career. That makes Neil 4-3 on Fancy Losers. As someone who's known Neil for a decade plus, it does not surprise me that he's good at finding the negative in people. So, in that note, Neil, who's the Fancy Loser this week?
We should not just assume that just because Mark Ingram has gone back to where it all began, that it's all going to be sunshine, rainbows and lollipops for David Johnson. It's not 2016. David Johnson stinks. The Texans stink. They're not going to run the ball, and they can't run the ball very well because David Johnson stinks. So it doesn't matter who he's playing. I did have some people on my Ask Duts today ask me, should I go with David Johnson over Chase Edmonds? Good God, man, no. Please. Not this week, not the rest of the season, never again in the future. So David Johnson, just because he doesn't have to fight with Mark Ingram for empty calorie touches, I really wouldn't. Please don't.
Do you know what I love about running backs? Is that I believe that David Johnson was the Marcus Grant first, no matter what.
No matter what, yeah.
And I remember that vividly. But in running back world, that was basically 8 million years ago.
Yeah, may as well have been.
Crazy. Right, let's get on and let's give you our fancy predictions for week 8, bound to go wrong. Neil, I'm going to go first. I'm going to tell you now. I'm doing it. A team without a win are going to win this week, and that team that's going to win will have the RB1 within their midst. That is DeAndre Swift of the Detroit Lions. He will be RB1 this week.
The Eagles are going to lose the Lions because they always lose the Lions. They're that bizarre team.
No, I know. We always used to lose. Washington always used to use them as well.
Yeah, they're just a bizarre team. Yeah, it's hard to argue. DeAndre Swift is very good. Could be the next generation Jamal Charles if his team wasn't so crap. And they didn't just insist on giving Jamal Williams his touches as well. It's a tough one this week because obviously you want to go bold and you want to be entertaining with this as well. So let's go there. I'm going to say 200 yards rushing for Nick Chubb because he's back. He's angry. He wants to start hurting people again.
That would be good because my team has been was decimated in the the biopocalypse or the whatever Bipocalypse and no Chubb last week and no Kareem Hunt. So basically any running back I had in any team was, having feet up Fridays. So yeah, Chubb seems like a good one. Fantastic, Neil. That is it. Usually right now, I would ask you what you've been up to, but I know what you've been up to because you've highlighted to the internet that you are a flipping expert in Peppa Pig. Can you please explain to the listeners what I'm talking about?
On one of my favourite podcasts, Living the Stream, with friends of the show, JJ Zacharyson and Denny Carter, there was lots of talk about Peppa Pig this week. Probably because for their Halloween, the late round QB family, so JJ's family. JJ what, mate? What's his surname? I've already said it once, go on.
Zacharyson.
Well done.
Thank you.
They were going as Peppa Pig, Daddy Pig, and Mummy Pig. And it got me thinking, the way my weird brain works, about Peppa Pig, who we know I've had issues with in the past. She's a little shit.
She's a shit, yeah.
Yeah. But it got me thinking some characters from Peppa Pig and what type of fantasy players they would be. So I'm going to read this out, because obviously, while tweets are good to be read, they're also better when you hear them in the voice of the idiot who wrote them.
Go for it.
So I shall begin. Daddy Pig. Turns up at the draft having done no research, no mocks, or even thought about a game since the last Super Bowl. He is a bit of an expert after all. Mummy Pig. Says she's not interested and only plays because the whole family is doing it, but actually spends her entire working day tinkering with lineups, scouring the waiver wire and reading streaming articles for kickers and defences. She's always on a computer. She'd get away with it. George Pig. As a tribute to his beloved dinosaur toy, refuses to acknowledge the existence of PPR format. Drafted Jordan Howard as his RB2 based solely on his lack of pass-catching upside. Cries whenever Red Zone shows one of his players failing to score. Peppa Pig, league know-it-all. Has read the rules but wildly misinterpreted at least half of them. would rather not win as long as her brother doesn't either. Quits the league every other week because it's boring. Miss Rabbit is in way too many leagues but can't stop herself signing up for them. Despite rostering every player across the entire NFL in at least one league, never fails to submit a lineup. Mr. Bull submits at least 3 proposed rule changes every year due to his desire to dig it up and start again. Has never made the playoffs despite his constant innovations. Madame Gazelle doesn't like football. Volunteered to serve as commissioner in an attempt to make everyone get along. Has never vetoed a trade. Hosts the draft every year. Beloved by all. Pedro Pony has turned up late for the draft every single year despite receiving 5 reminders the day before. Frequently turns up with the wrong cheat sheet or thinks it's a draft for a completely different sport. Regular last place finisher.
Spectacular, Neil, as always. Neil is at N.13. I am at Mandy7 and combined we are at waxing_lyrical. We could talk more, but what's the point? Neil just solved the internet by telling us what Peppa Pig would do in fancy. So due to that, these top guys are out.